Good evening. Settle in. Let the day fall away from you. Perhaps you're by a fire, feeling its radiant warmth push back the chill of the world outside. The logs hiss and pop, a gentle domestic rhythm. Perhaps you're tucked into bed, the weight of the blankets a comforting pressure, a safe harbor in the quiet dark of your room. The house is still. The city, or the countryside, has surrendered to the night. This is a time for rest, for peace, for letting the mind drift. And yet, you're here, because you know that in the quietest moments, the most unsettling truths can be heard. You understand that the line between a peaceful night and a night of terror is sometimes nothing more than a locked door, a chance decision, a single moment of darkness breaking through. You seek not to be frightened, but to understand, to peer into the abyss from the safety of your own sanctuary. And so, as the fire crackles and the world sleeps, I will tell you a story. It is a true story, though the names and some identifying details have been altered to respect the living and the thus dead. It is a story that begins, as so many do, in a place that believed itself to be immune to such things. A place of breathtaking beauty and deceptive tranquility. Our story takes us to the coast of Oregon, to a town that we will call Port Blossom. Imagine it, if you will. Port Blossom is not a bustling city. It is a pocket of civilization carved into the dramatic, untamed landscape of the Pacific Northwest. To the west, the vast, moody expanse of the Pacific Ocean, its waves crashing against jagged, sea-stack dotted shores in a constant percussive roar that becomes the town's heartbeat. To the east, the dense, primeval forests of the Coast Range rise like a great green wall, cloaked in near-perpetual mist, smelling of damp earth, pine, and decay. The trees here are giant Douglas firs and Sitka spruces so old they seem to be holding up the sky itself. The town of Port Blossom nestles in a small, protected cove. Its main street is lined with buildings from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, their facades painted in muted coastal tones seafoam green, slate blue, barn red faded and weathered by a century of salt spray and relentless winter rain. There is a single traffic light, a handful of art galleries, a bookstore that smells of old paper and brewing coffee, a tavern where fishermen and loggers share stories over pints of local ale, and a small white-steepled church inn. Port Blossom, the weather is not just a forecast. It is a character, a constant presence that shapes the lives and moods of its inhabitants. Fog rolls in from the sea without warning, swallowing the town in a soft, gray blanket, muffling sound and blurring vision. It can reduce the world to a radius of 20 feet, turning familiar landmarks into ghostly apparitions. The rain, for 9 months of the year, is a steady companion, ranging from a gentle, cleansing drizzle to furious, wind-driven squalls that rattle windows and send waves crashing over the SEAWLL. The people of Port Blossom, a little over 2,000 souls, are a reflection of this environment. They are hardy, self-reliant, and private. They are accustomed to the isolation, and many have chosen it deliberately, seeking refuge from the noise and chaos of the wider world. It is a community where everyone knows everyone, if not by name, then by face, by truck, by the dog they walk. Along the beach, gossip travels on the salty air, but so does support. When a fisherman's boat needs repair, hands appear to help. When a family falls on hard times, anonymous casseroles appear on their doorstep. They have, for generations, cultivated a shared understanding. The world outside is vast and unpredictable, but here, within the embrace of the mountains and the sea, they are safe. They are a community. This was their most cherished and most dangerous illusion. Our story begins on a Tuesday morning in late October. The tourist season had long since ended, and the town had settled back into its quiet, off-season rhythm. A thick, wet fog had descended overnight, the kind that feels heavy on the skin and drips from the needles of the towering pines. The sound of the foghorn at the mouth of the cove was a mournful, solitary moan, a sound so familiar it was part of the town's silence. At 7:15 a.m., a man named Silas Croft pushed his small dory away from the town dock. Silas was in his late 60s, a retired logger with a face like a topographical map of a hard life. He now spent his mornings checking the crab pots he kept in the cove. It was a ritual, a way to connect with the sea and bring home a fresh supper. As his small boat cut a silent V through the placid gray water, the fog was so dense he could barely see the shore, navigating by memory and the looming, indistinct shapes of the other boats moored in the harbor. He was heading for a spot near the base of Whisperwind Bluff, a dramatic cliff on the north side of the cove where the water was deep and the crabbing was good. As he neared the spot, he saw something that didn't belong. A small white cottage, one of a handful that were built precariously close to the cliff's edge, had its lights on. This was the cottage of Elara Vance. Elara was something of a town fixture, though she was not from Port Blossom. She had arrived 5 years prior, a woman in her late 20s, seeking the solitude and inspiration the coast offered. She was an artist, a painter, and her work had quickly gained a reputation, not just in the local galleries, but in the wider art world of Portland and Seattle. Her canvases were large, dynamic, and captured the soul of the coast, the violent energy of its storms, the brooding melancholy of its fogs, the ethereal beauty of its fleeting sunsets. She was, by all accounts, a quiet, gentle soul. She kept to herself, but was always friendly, with a warm smile and eyes that seemed to be constantly observing, constantly seeing the color and light in the world. Silas, like many of the older residents, had a soft spot for her. He'd sometimes leave a Dungeness crab on her porch, and she'd thank him with a small, perfect watercolor of a shell, or a SEABIRD dot. So, seeing her lights on wasn't entirely unusual. She was an artist. She kept odd hours. But there was something else. The front door of her little cottage, which faced the sea, was wide open. It gaped like a dark mouth in the gray morning, and the damp fog was rolling right inside. In a town where people left their keys in their cars, an open door wasn't a sign of crime, but of carelessness. Still, in this weather, with the dampness that could seep into the very bones of a house, it was strange. A profound waste of heat. Silas steered his dory closer. "Elara?" He called out, his voice sounding small and thin against the vastness of the fog. "You all right in there?" "Your doors." "Open." There was no answer. Only the cry of a distant gull and the rhythmic moan of the foghorn. He felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. It was an instinct honed by a lifetime spent in a place where nature's dangers were ever present. You learned to pay attention to things that were out of place. An open door in a fog bank was out of place. He tied his dory to her small private dock. The wood was slick with algae and sea mist. As he stepped onto the porch, he called her name again, louder this time. "Elara!" "It's Silas Croft." Silence. The cottage was eerily quiet. The only sound from within was a faint, rhythmic ticking. He stepped over the threshold into the warmth. The air inside was thick with the smells of oil paint, turpentine, and something else. Something sweet and coppery. The ticking was from a beautiful, antique grandfather clock that stood against the far wall, its pendulum swinging in a steady, hypnotic arc. It was counting the seconds in a room where time seemed to have stopped. The cottage was a single, large open space, serving as both living area and studio. Canvases in various stages of completion were everywhere. Some leaned against the walls. Others sat on easels. Most were her signature landscapes, churning seas and brooding skies. But on the main easel, facing the center of the room, was something different. It was a portrait dark and abstract, the features blurred and indistinct, as if viewed through a rain-streaked window. And then Silas saw her. Elara Vance was on the floor, in the center of the room, lying on a large, cream-colored artisan rug. She was on her back, her arms resting slightly out from her sides, almost peacefully. She was dressed in a simple white nightgown. Her long, dark hair was fanned out around her head like a halo against the pale wool of the rug. Her eyes were open, staring up at the vaulted, wood-beamed ceiling with a look of placid surprise. Silas's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he thought she might have fainted or fallen. He took a hesitant step closer. "Elara?" he whispered. He saw two things then, two details that burned themselves into his memory with the searing permanence of a branding iron. The first was the source of the coppery smell. A dark, crimson stain had blossomed on the front of her white nightgown, directly over her heart. It was small, neat, almost geometric in its precision. It didn't look like a wound from a struggle. It looked like a mark that had been placed there. The second detail was even stranger. Resting delicately on that crimson stain, perfectly centered, was a single flower. It was a camellia blossom. A deep, velvety red, its petals flawlessly formed. It was a flower of impossible perfection, made all the more impossible by the fact that it was late October. Camellias bloomed in the late winter and early spring. To find one now, so pristine, was unheard of. It was as if it had been grown in a greenhouse and delivered for this single, horrific purpose. Silas Croft, a man who had faced down charging bears and felled trees that could crush a house, felt a cold terror unlike anything he had ever known. He backed away slowly, his boots making no sound on the wooden floor. He stumbled back out the open door into the cold, cleansing fog. He did not get back in his dory. He scrambled up the muddy path from the cottage to the coastal road and ran, his old legs pumping, his heart hammering against his ribs, not stopping until he burst through the door of the Port Blossom Sheriff's Office, his voice a ragged gasp, shattering the morning peace with a truth the town was not prepared to hear. The call went out to the Oregon State Police. A potential homicide in a town that hadn't had one in over 30 years was beyond the scope of the local sheriff and his 2 deputies. The investigation would be led by a detective from the Major Crimes Unit based out of Newport. An hour's drive south. His name was Alistair Finch. Detective Finch was a man who seemed designed by the same melancholic architect as the Oregon coast. He was in his late 40s, tall and lanky, with a habitual stoop to his shoulders as if carrying an invisible weight. He had a long, thoughtful face, gray eyes that had seen too much, and a quiet, almost mournful demeanor that people often mistook for sadness. It wasn't sadness. It was a profound, bone-deep weariness. Finch had been a homicide detective for 18 years, and the work had sanded away his illusions, leaving behind a core of methodical patience and a quiet, observant empathy. He drove north through the relentless drizzle, the windshield wipers of his unmarked sedan keeping a steady, metronomic beat. He knew Port Blossom. He'd passed through it on fishing trips, had eaten at the diner, and had always found its postcard beauty to be slightly unsettling. He believed that the prettier the facade, the darker the secrets it was trying to hide. When he arrived, local sheriff, a stout, florid man named Bill Gunderson, had already secured the scene. Yellow tape, incongruously bright against the muted greens and grays of the landscape, cordoned off Elara Vance's little cottage. A small crowd of locals stood at a distance, huddled under umbrellas, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and morbid curiosity. The fog had begun to lift, but a low, gray ceiling of cloud remained, pressing down on the town. Finch ducked under the tape, pulling on a pair of blue latex gloves. Gunderson met him on the porch. "Alistair, hell of a thing," the sheriff sighed, his voice low. "Nothing like this. Not ever." "Tell me what you've got, Bill," Finch said, his voice calm, steady. It was the voice he always used at a crime scene. A voice designed to cut through the emotion and get to the facts. "Victim is Elara Vance. Lived here about 5 years. Artist, Silas Croft. One of our local fishermen found her about 2 hours ago. Door was wide open." Finch nodded, his eyes already scanning, absorbing every detail. The worn porch boards, the pot of dead geraniums, the way the wind chime was tangled and silent. "Anyone go inside besides you and Silas?" "Just me. I confirmed she was deceased and backed right out. Didn't touch a thing. My deputy is taking Silas's statement down at the station. The crime scene unit is on its way from Salem, but it'll be another hour at least." "Good," Finch said. He paused at the open doorway, his gaze sweeping the interior. He was like a painter himself, taking in the composition of the room. The light, the shadows, the arrangement of objects. Every crime scene told a story, and Finch was an expert at reading its language. He stepped inside. The air was still. The grandfather clock continued its relentless ticking, a sound that grated on Finch's nerves. He saw her then, lying in the center of the room, a small, still figure in a tableau of domesticity and violence. He walked slowly around the perimeter of the rug, his eyes missing nothing. The lack of any apparent struggle. The neatness of the room, save for the scattered art supplies, which seemed to be their natural state. There were no overturned lamps, no chairs knocked askew. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. The lock was a simple bolt, easily defeated, but it appeared undamaged. He crouched down, not too close, and studied the body. He noted her position, the placid expression on her face. He saw the wound, the small dark circle on her nightgown. It looked like a puncture wound, narrow, precise. An ice pick, perhaps? Or a stiletto, something slender. And then he saw the flower, the camellia. He stared at it for a long time. It was, as Silas had described, perfect. Its petals were a deep, vibrant red, without a single brown spot or insect bite. It was dewy, as if it had been freshly picked. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. He could see that the stem had been neatly snipped. This was not a flower that had fallen from a bush. It had been placed, deliberately. "What do you make of that?" Gunderson asked, standing in the doorway, unwilling to come further into the desecrated space. "It's a signature," Finch said, his voice barely a whisper. "Or a message." He stood up and continued his slow circle of the room. His gaze fell upon the painting on the easel, the dark, abstract portrait. It was unsettling. Unlike her other works, which were filled with the wild, natural light of light. The coast, this one was claustrophobic. The face was a swirl of bruised purples, angry blacks, and sickly greens. There were no discernible features, no eyes or mouth, but somehow it conveyed a powerful sense of malevolent presence. It felt like a portrait of a shadow. Finch walked over to a small desk tucked in a corner. It was tidy. A laptop, closed. A stack of art history books. A mug containing a collection of pens and brushes. And a leather-bound journal. Finch, using a pen from his pocket to avoid smudging any potential prints, carefully opened it. The most recent entry was from the previous night. Elara's handwriting was elegant, a looping cursive. October 28th. The fog is in again. It feels different tonight. Not a blanket, but a shroud. I've been working on the new piece, the one I can't explain. It feels like I'm not painting it myself, but that something is painting through me. A strange energy. It's him. He's close. I can feel him in the stillness, in the silence between the waves. I think he's finally come for me. I'm not afraid, just tired. The camellia on the porch this morning was beautiful. So red. A promise, I suppose. Finch read the entry twice, then a third time. He closed the journal carefully, his mind racing. Him. He's close. A camellia on the porch this morning. This changed everything. This wasn't a random act. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was personal. The victim knew her killer. She may have even been expecting him. And the flower, the impossible, out-of-season camellia, was not just a post-mortem signature. It was a calling card. He had announced his presence beforehand. He looked around the room again, seeing it in a new light. This wasn't just a crime scene. It was the final, terrible act of a play that had been in motion for some time. The open door wasn't carelessness on Elara's part. It was an invitation. Finch walked back to the body and looked down at the victim's serene face. "Who were you, Elara Vance?" he murmured to the silent room. "And who was it that you were waiting for?" The investigation began to fan out. While the state crime scene unit meticulously processed the cottage, dusting for prints, collecting fibers, and photographing every square inch, Finch and Gunderson started the grim task of trying to reconstruct the last days of Elara Vance's life. They started with her friends. It wasn't a long list. Elara, it seemed, was more of an acquaintance than a friend to most people in town. She was liked, but not well known. Her closest confidant appeared to be a woman named Clara Jenkins, the owner of the Salty Page. The town's bookstore and coffee shop. Finch found Clara in the back room of her shop, surrounded by towers of books. She was a woman in her 40s, with kind, intelligent eyes that were now red-rimmed from crying. She had already heard the news. In a town like Port Blossom, such news traveled faster than the fog could burn off. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling as she clutched a warm mug of tea. Not Elara. She was the gentlest person I've ever met. She wouldn't hurt a fly. "Ms. Jenkins," Finch began, his tone soft. "We're trying to understand what happened." The entry in her journal from last night mentioned a him. It said she felt he was close. "Do you have any idea who she might have been talking about?" Clara frowned, thinking. "A man?" She was very private about her personal life. She never spoke of a boyfriend or a partner. Not in all the years I've known her. She paused, her brow furrowed. But there was something. About 6 months ago, she started to change. Change how? Finch prompted. She became more withdrawn, more watchful. She used to come in here, and we'd talk for an hour. Suddenly, she would just get her coffee and leave. She seemed distracted, jumpy. And her art changed too. "The dark portrait?" Finch asked. Clara nodded. "That was the latest one, but it started before that. Her seascapes became more violent. The colors got darker. I asked her about it once, and she just gave me this sad little smile and said she was painting what she felt. I pressed her a little, asked if everything was all right. She told me she was dealing with something from her past. A shadow, she called it. A shadow she thought she had outrun." "Did she say what this shadow was? Or who?" "No," Clara said, shaking her head. She was adamant. She said it was her burden to carry alone. But there was one thing. A few weeks ago, she came in looking terrified. She said she'd gotten a letter. There was no stamp, no postmark. It had just been left in her mailbox. "What did the letter say?" Finch asked, leaning forward. She wouldn't tell me. She just said it was from him, that he'd found her. She burned it. Right there, in my ashtray. Clara pointed to a small ceramic dish on a nearby table. Then she looked at me and said the strangest thing. She said, "He always finds his lost birds. He always finds his lost birds." The phrase was poetic, possessive, and deeply sinister. Finch's next stop was Elara's family. It took some digging to find them. She was estranged from her parents, who lived in a wealthy suburb of San Francisco. Finch made the difficult call. Her father, a high-powered attorney, was cold and clipped on the phone. He expressed a kind of detached regret, the kind one might reserve for a poor business decision. He said Elara had been a troubled and overly emotional child who had rejected the life they had planned for her. He said he hadn't spoken to her in 7 years. When Finch asked if Elara had ever been in a controlling or abusive relationship, if there was a him from her past who might have wanted to harm her, the father's answer was chilling. My daughter, he said, his voice like ice, had a penchant for attracting monsters. She saw them as tragic, romantic figures. She tried to fix them. It was only a matter of time before one of them broke her instead. We washed our hands of it long ago. He offered no names, no further details, and ended the call. The puzzle of Elara Vance was deepening. She was a woman who had run from a past that included a mysterious, possessive man she referred to as a shadow. A man who sent cryptic notes and left out-of-season flowers as a prelude to murder. A man who had found her in her seaside sanctuary late that evening. Finch sat in his bleak motel room on the edge of Port Blossom. The crime scene unit had finished its work. The initial findings were sparse. No usable fingerprints, other than Elara's. No foreign DNA under her fingernails. No signs of a struggle. The cause of death was a single stab wound from a thin, sharp object approximately 4 inches long, which had pierced her heart, causing death almost instantaneously. The murder weapon was missing. The only physical clues were the ones the killer had left behind intentionally. The open door and the perfect red camellia. It was a taunt, a display of absolute control. The killer hadn't broken in. He had been let in. He hadn't fought with her. He had executed her. And he had adorned her body with a symbol. Finch had the camellia on his mind. He had called a botanist at Oregon State University. The professor was intrigued and baffled. A Camellia japonica of that variety, in that condition, in late October. On the Oregon coast? It was horticulturally impossible, he'd said. It would have to have been cultivated in a highly controlled, specialized greenhouse. It was not something you could just find growing in someone's garden. This meant the killer had planned his actions with meticulous, patient care. He had not just decided to kill Elara. He had cultivated the instrument of his signature. The fire in your fireplace has likely burned down to a bed of glowing embers. The house is settled deep in the night. The story of Port Blossom has begun, its peaceful facade torn away to reveal the violence beneath. A woman is dead. A ghost from her past has emerged from the shadows. And a detective, a weary student of human darkness, is left with a handful of cryptic clues. A dark painting, a strange phrase about lost birds, and a single impossible flower. The questions hang in the quiet air, waiting for an answer. Who? Was this man Elara Vance feared and expected? And where did he get that perfect blood-red camellia? The truth lies buried, somewhere in the past, waiting to be unearthed. The grandfather clock in the silent, empty cottage continues to tick, marking the time since a life was taken. And out in the cove, the fog is beginning to roll in once more, ready to cloak the town and its new, terrible secret. The night gives way to a gray and weeping dawn. In Port Blossom, the day begins not with the familiar scent of salt and pine, but with the metallic tongue of fear. The news of Elara Vance's murder has seeped into every home, a cold draft under every door. Curtains that were always left open are now drawn tight. Doors that were never locked are now bolted. The friendly morning waves between neighbors are replaced with quick, uncertain nods. The unspoken covenant of safety has been broken, and the community, once a single, breathing organism, has fractured into 2,000 separate points of anxiety. In his drab motel room, Detective Alistair Finch is already awake. He has been for hours. Sleep, for him, is a shallow, troubled sea, and the details of the Vance case are jagged rocks just beneath the surface. He sits at a small, scarred table, a lukewarm cup of coffee in his hand, the contents of a thin file spread before him. The preliminary autopsy report, the initial statement from a grief-stricken Silas Croft, a single high-resolution photograph of the crime scene. In the center of the photo, lying on the cream-colored rug, is the small, still form of Elara Vance, and on her chest, a splash of impossible crimson. The camellia. Finch stares at the flower. It is the anchor point of the entire case. It is both a clue and a piece of psychological warfare. It speaks of a killer who is not just violent, but patient, meticulous, and arrogant. A killer who doesn't just want to end a life, but to make a statement. To craft a perfect, terrible work of art that the first order of business is the digital ghost. Elara's laptop and phone were taken into evidence. Finch had put in the request for the warrants yesterday, and by morning, a forensics technician from the State Police Cybercrimes Unit is on the line. Got into her laptop. Detective, the tech, a young man named Kenji, says. His voice is all business, a sharp contrast to the moody atmosphere of the coast. Not much in the way of recent communication. Very few emails, mostly receipts for art supplies and gallery correspondence. Her social media was dormant for over 4 years. It's like she digitally unplugged when she moved to Port Blossom. That fits, Finch says, looking out the window at the rain-streaked parking lot. She was hiding. What about her search history? Now that's interesting, Kenji replies. Over the last 6 months, a lot of searches. Things like, can a restraining order be enforced across state lines? Best home security systems for isolated areas. Untraceable communication. Methods. A couple of weeks ago, she searched for a local gun shop and looked up Oregon's waiting period for handgun purchases. Finch feels a pang of sorrow for the dead woman. He can see her, sitting alone in her cottage as the fog rolled in, the blue light of the screen illuminating a face tight with fear, trying to find a way to protect herself from a shadow she knew was coming. Anything else? Finch asks. Yeah, one name searched repeatedly. Julian Croft. Julian Croft. She searched for him in combination with words like where is, current location, botany, and San Francisco. And then there's the deleted email folder. We were able to recover fragments of 3 emails sent from her account in the last month, all to an address that's now defunct. They were one-sided. She was pleading, please, Julian, leave me in peace. I'm not yours anymore. The flowers have to stop. I know it's you, Julian Croft. The name lands with the weight of an anchor. The flowers have to stop. So the camellia on her body was not the first. It was the last. The final punctuation mark on a long and terrifying conversation. Finch hangs up the phone, the name echoing in the quiet room. Julian Croft. He now has a name for the shadow. The next step is to give that shadow a face, a history. He knows from the search terms that the story begins in San Francisco. He picks up the phone again, this time to dial the San Francisco Police Department. Getting information from another jurisdiction, especially on a cold trail, can be like pulling teeth. But Finch is patient. He knows how to wait. While the request grinds its way through the gears of interstate bureaucracy, Finch drives back to the cottage. The yellow tape is still up, a garish scar on the tranquil landscape. The air inside is cold and still, carrying the faint chemical scent of luminol and fingerprint powder. The crime scene unit has been thorough, but the feeling of violation lingers. The grandfather clock has been stopped, its pendulum silent. The silence now feels more absolute, More profound. Finch isn't here for forensic evidence. He's here for context, for understanding. He goes to Elara's bookshelf. It's a curated collection. Art history, philosophy, novels by Virginia Woolf and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and poetry, lots of poetry. Rilke, Neruda, Dickinson. He pulls the books out one by one, fanning the pages, looking for inscriptions, for anything tucked inside. In a slender, leather-bound volume of obscure 20th century symbolist poets, he finds it. A single page marked with a faded silk ribbon. The poem is titled The Collector. Finch reads the lines, his breath misting in the cold air. The poem describes a strange, godlike figure who wanders the earth, gathering beautiful, broken things, a bird with a broken wing, a fallen star, a forgotten melody. He doesn't fix them. He simply adds them to his collection, preserving them in their state of beautiful tragedy. Near the end of the poem, a single line is underlined in faint pencil. The lead is so soft, it's almost a smudge. He gathers his. Lost birds to cage their song. The phrase Clara Jenkins had quoted. It wasn't something Elara had made up. It was from a poem. A poem about a possessive, obsessive collector. Finch can almost hear the conversation. Julian, perhaps quoting this. Poem to a young, impressionable Elara. A line that might have sounded romantic at first, but which curdled over time into a threat. He wasn't her lover. He was her collector, and she was his lost bird. The phone in his pocket buzzes. It's SFPD, a record sergeant with a gravelly voice. Detective Finch, got your query on an Elara Vance. Pulled up a flag. She filed for a temporary restraining order 7 years ago. Dropped it a month later. Against whom? Finch asks, his pulse quickening. A guy named Julian Croft. At the time, they were both students at the university there. She was art. He was postgrad botany. Botany, the Camellia. It clicks into place with the force of a slammed door. What were the grounds for the trawl? Standard stuff for these things, but intense, the sergeant says, his voice flat, as he reads from the report. Stalking. Unwanted communication. Showed up at her apartment at all hours. Sent her gifts she'd rejected. Followed her to class. Friends gave statements he was brilliant but possessive. Called her his perfect specimen. After she broke up with him, he told one of her friends he would tend to her forever, whether she wanted it or not. Classic obsessive behavior. Why was it dropped? Finch asks. Says here she voluntarily withdrew the petition. No reason given. After that, they both fall off our radar. She finished her degree and left the city. He seems to have dropped out of his PhD program. Vanished. Vanished. A ghost. An intelligent, obsessive ghost with a PhD-level knowledge of botany. A man capable of cultivating the perfect. Out-of-season flower as a symbol of his inescapable claim. Finch thanks the sergeant and hangs up. He stands in the middle of Elara's studio, looking at the dark, abstract portrait on the easel. He sees it clearly now. It's a portrait of Julian Croft, not his physical features, but the essence of his presence in her mind, a swirling, featureless vortex of obsession, a shadow that consumed all the light. The investigation now has a clear vector. Finch needs to find Julian Croft, but a man who could vanish 7 years ago, who could operate without leaving a digital footprint, who could find a woman who had gone to great lengths to disappear herself, would not be easy to locate. This is not a common criminal. This is a predator of uncommon intelligence and patience. Finch's team starts the search. They run the name Julian Croft through every database imaginable. DMV records, credit bureaus, IRS filings, social media. Results are a string of negatives. There is no current driver's license for a Julian Croft with his date of birth. No credit cards, no bank accounts, no property deeds. For the last 7 years, according to the official records of modern life, Julian Croft does not exist. Living completely off the grid, Finch says to Sheriff Gunderson back at the Port Blossom station. The station is a small, cramped building that smells of wet wool and stale coffee. He's likely using cash, maybe living under an assumed name. This is a man who has planned this for a very, very long time. Gunderson, whose face seems to have acquired new lines of worry in the past 24 hours, shakes his head. So where do we even start? He could be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. He has a weakness, Finch says, tapping the photo of the camellia. His ego, his methodology. He needed her to know it was him. The flower is his signature, and it's a very specific signature. The botanist I spoke to is clear. Cultivating a flower like that requires a specialized, climate-controlled greenhouse. It's not a hobby for amateurs. It requires expertise, dedication, and resources. We're not looking for a man in an apartment. We're looking for a man with a garden. The search pivots. Instead of looking for a man, they start looking for a place. They cross-reference property records for greenhouses and specialty nurseries in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California with utility records, looking for anonymous. Cash payments or unusually high electricity usage for a single-family dwelling. It's a colossal, mind-numbing task. A search for one particular needle in a continent-sized haystack. Days turn into a week. The media descends on Port Blossom. There's satellite trucks lining the narrow coast highway like vultures. The story is irresistible. A beautiful, solitary artist murdered in her idyllic coastal retreat by a mysterious, flower-leaving killer. The narrative captures the public imagination. They call him the Camellia Killer. The name makes Finch's teeth ache. It romanticizes a brutal, cowardly act of obsessive violence. The town remains locked in a state of low-grade panic. The tourist trade, even the trickle of off-season storm watchers, dries up completely. The Salty Page bookstore is empty. The tavern is quiet, the usual boisterous laughter replaced by hushed, fearful conversations. Every stranger is viewed with suspicion. Every passing car is scrutinized. Finch feels the pressure of the clock, a different clock than the one in Elara's cottage. It's the clock of a cooling trail, of public memory fading, of a killer slipping further and further into the shadows. He so clearly prefers. He decides to take another look to the evidence from the cottage, hoping for a detail he missed. A small, overlooked thread. His attention is drawn back to Elara's finances. He'd noted it before, but it had seemed insignificant. A small automatic payment, $150 a month, made from her account to a self-storage facility. The facility wasn't in Port Blossom. It was an hour inland, in a drab, sprawling town called Mapleton, far from the scenic beauty of the coast. Why would a woman living in a cottage with ample space need a storage unit an hour away? Unless the things she was storing were things she didn't want near her, things she wanted to put away, physically and mentally. It's a long shot, but it's a thread. Finch gets a warrant and drives inland, away from the sea and the fog, into the flat, gray landscape of the valley. The storage facility is a sprawling, anonymous complex of corrugated steel and orange doors. The manager, a bored-looking man, chewing on a toothpick, uses a pair of bolt cutters to open Unit 221. The metal door rolls up with a deafening screech. The air that wafts out is dry and still, smelling of dust and dried paint. The unit is not full. In the center sits a small stack of canvases, wrapped in heavy cloth. Against the back wall are 2 cardboard boxes, sealed with yellowing tape. Finch carefully unwraps the first canvas. The style is recognizably Elara's, but the feeling is completely different. It's a painting of a sun-drenched San Francisco street, alive with color and light and people. It's hopeful, vibrant, full of life. He unwraps another. A portrait. Of a young woman, a self-portrait. He realizes with a wide, optimistic smile. This was Elara before the shadow fell. Before she fled to the coast to paint her fears. He turns to the boxes. Using his pocket knife, he slits the tape on the first one. It's full of books and college textbooks. The second box is heavier. He opens it. It's filled with personal effects from her life in San Francisco. Photo albums, mementos, and at the very bottom, a stack of journals, bound not in leather like the one in her cottage, but in simple, spiral-bound notebooks. These were the chronicles of her old life, the life she had tried to lock away. Finch takes the boxes back to his motel room. That night, with the rain once again lashing against the window, he begins to read. He starts with the earliest journal, from her first year of university. The entries are full of the breathless excitement of a young woman discovering her art and her freedom. And then, a new name appears. Julian. Met the most incredible man today in the university gardens. She wrote, Julian Croft. He's a botanist, a graduate student. He's brilliant. He showed me a hybrid orchid he's developing. He talks about flowers like they're poetry. He has the most intense eyes I've ever seen. It feels like he sees right into me. Finch reads on, his weariness forgotten, replaced by a grim, voyeuristic focus. He is watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. The initial entries are a whirlwind of romance. Julian is charming, attentive, brilliant. He showers her with attention, with exotic flowers from the university greenhouse, with poetry. He calls her his perfect, rare blossom, but slowly, subtly, the tone of the journal entries begins to shift. Julian was waiting for me outside my painting class again today. It was sweet, but I told him I was having coffee with Sarah. He said he didn't mind. He just wanted to make sure I was safe. It felt a little strange. A few weeks later, we had a fight. My first real fight. I was invited to a weekend retreat with some other artists. He didn't want me to go. He said my art was a delicate thing, that it could be corrupted by other influences. He said he was my only true muse. When I insisted, he got so quiet. It was scarier than if he had yelled. He took a gardenia from a vase and crushed it in his fist. The entries grow darker, more frantic. The possessiveness escalates to control. He dictates who she can see, what she should wear, what she should paint. He fills her small apartment with so many flowers she feels like she's suffocating. Her paintings, once so full of light, begin to feature shadows in the corners, tangled vines that seem to be reaching for the subjects. The final journal is half empty. The entries are sparse, the handwriting shaky. I tried to end it. He just smiled. He said that was impossible. He said a collector never lets go of his most prized possession. He quoted that awful poem again. He said I was his lost bird, and he would build me a beautiful cage. I see him everywhere, outside my window, across the street. Sometimes I think I just imagine him, but then another flower will appear on my doorstep. Always something perfect and strange, something he grew. I went to the police. I have a restraining order. It feels like a piece of paper against a hurricane. He's not angry. He seems amused. He left a black rose on my car this morning. A black rose. He told me once he was perfecting a truly black hybrid. He called it the velvet absence. He is showing me that he can get to me anytime he wants. The last entry Finch reads that night is from the day she decided to flee. I can't do this anymore. The order is useless. He is a ghost. I can't live like a prisoner in my own life. I'm dropping the tro. The lawyer says it might provoke him if I serve him with it officially. My only chance is to disappear, to become someone else, somewhere else. A place he'll never think to look. I'm packing a small bag. I'm leaving. Everything else behind. I have to run before he finds a way to plant me in his garden forever. Plant me in his garden forever. The words hang in the air of the stale motel room. It is not just a turn of phrase. It's a description of his ultimate fantasy. The journals confirm it all. The obsession, the methodology, the long, terrifying history. Elara Vance did not die in a random act of violence. She was the final acquisition. In a 7-year-long hunt, the killer is not a phantom. He is Julian Croft, the brilliant botanist, the mad collector. And Finch now understands, with chilling certainty, the deep symbolic meaning of that single red camellia. It was the fulfillment of a promise. A final, perfect specimen, pinned. And displayed. The question is no longer who or why. The question that remains pressing and urgent as the storm outside is where. Where has Julian Croft been hiding all these years? Where is the secret garden from which he plucks his terrifying floral messages? Finch knows that finding that place is the only way to stop the collector from ever finding another lost bird. The haystack is vast, but he finally has the precise shape of the needle. The night deepens. The house around you is a bastion of quiet, a vessel sailing through the dark and silent hours. In these moments, when the world is stripped of its noise and distractions, the mind can achieve a state of singular focus. It is this same focus that now consumes Detective Alistair Finch. He sits in the sterile quiet of his motel room, the rain-slicked world outside reflected in the dark glass of the window. Before him lie the journals of Elara Vance, a testament. In ink and paper to a life stolen by a creeping, suffocating shadow. He has the who. He has the why. But Julian Croft, the collector, remains a ghost. Finch knows that men like Julian, men who operate with such meticulous, long-term planning, do not make careless mistakes. They do not leave obvious clues. Their arrogance is their undoing, but it is an arrogance of intellect, not of sloppiness. The clue, Finch reasons, will not be a dropped matchbook or a forgotten fingerprint. It will be something hidden in plain sight, something Elara herself recorded without understanding its significance. So he reads the journals again, not for the narrative of fear and abuse, but for the mundane details that surround it. The names of cafes, the titles of movies, the descriptions of parks. He is searching for a loose thread in the tightly woven tapestry of Julian's obsessive world. He reads through the descriptions of their early, happier days, when Julian's brilliance was still captivating, not yet terrifying. And then he finds it. It's a small, almost trivial entry, tucked between a description of a painting and a complaint about a difficult professor. Julian was in a strange mood today, sentimental. He was talking about his childhood. It's the first time he's really opened up about his family. He said he gets his love for plants from his grandfather, a man named Matthias Croft. He said Matthias was a pioneer, one of the first to cultivate rare Asian orchids here in Oregon. Back in the 30s, he had a nursery somewhere deep in the woods, a place Julian called the Glass Eden. He said the family lost it during the war, but that the land was still theirs. He looked so sad when he said it. He said, all that beauty, just left to rot. The Glass Eden. The phrase resonates in the silent room. It's poetic. It's proprietary. It's exactly the kind of name Julian would cherish. A lost family. Legacy. A place of beauty left to rot. For a man obsessed with collecting and preserving beauty, what could be more compelling than reclaiming his own personal, lost Eden? A place deep in the Oregon woods, isolated, forgotten. The perfect place to disappear. The perfect place to build a secret garden. Finch feels a jolt, the thrill of the hunt that never quite leaves a man in his line of work. This is it. This is the thread. The next morning, Finch is not searching digital databases. He is in the county archives, A dim, dusty room that smells of old paper and decaying glue. He's not looking for Julian Croft. He's looking for Matthias. Croft. He pulls out ancient plat maps and property ledgers, the paper so brittle it threatens to crumble in his hands. He works backward from the 1940s, tracing the ownership of land parcels registered to the Croft family dot. It takes him the better part of the day. Finally, he finds it. A 50-acre parcel of timberland, located in the deepest part of the Coast Range, about 30 miles northeast of Port Blossom. The land was purchased by Matthias Croft in 1928. Ownership passed to his son and then to his grandson Julian. The property is officially listed as unimproved timberland. The property taxes, Finch notes, are paid every year, on time, not by check or credit card, but with a money order mailed from a different post office in a different Oregon town each year. Anonymous, untraceable, there's more. He cross-references the parcel number with the Public Utility Commission. The property has no official residence, no septic system, no phone line. But for the last 7 years, it has had an active electrical account under a generic holding, company name, and the usage is astronomical, far too high for a simple well pump or a security light. It is the kind of electrical draw required for a constant high-output heating, ventilation, and lighting system. The kind of system needed to run a sophisticated, climate-controlled greenhouse. Finch has found the garden. He doesn't call for a SWAT team. He knows Julian is not a man who will engage in a shootout. His violence is intimate, precise, and symbolic. A large, aggressive police presence might provoke an unpredictable reaction, perhaps the destruction of evidence, or worse. This needs a quiet, deliberate approach. That evening, as dusk bleeds purple and orange across the sky, Finch and Sheriff Gunderson drive up a long-forgotten logging road that snakes deep into the mountains. The road is barely a track, overgrown, with ferns and moss, the canopy of ancient firs, so thick it creates a premature twilight. After several miles, they see a rusted, dilapidated gate hanging half off its hinges. A faded, barely legible sign reads, Croft Nursery, Est, 1928. They leave the car and proceed on foot. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. It is utterly silent, save for the whisper of the wind in the high branches. After a quarter-mile walk, the forest opens into a clearing, and there it is. The Glass Eden dot. It's a scene of eerie contradiction. The remains of an old nursery are visible rotting timber frames of collapsed shade houses, piles of terracotta pots, green with moss, a derelict shack that must have been the office. Nature is busy reclaiming it all, but in the center of this decay stands a structure of immaculate, modern perfection. A large geodesic dome greenhouse, its glass panes gleaming in the fading light. A soft, warm, yellow-white light glows from within, an unnatural heart of summer beating in the chest of the autumn woods. A thick electrical cable, buried in a freshly dug trench, snakes from a utility pole at the edge of the clearing to the dome. Finch and Gunderson draw their weapons, their movements slow and silent. The only sound is the soft hum of generators and fans coming from the structure. There are no guards, no dogs, just the dome glowing under the darkening sky. Finch puts his hand on the door. It's unlocked. He pushes it open. The wave of heat and humidity that rolls out is like stepping into another world. The air is thick, sweet, and heavy, saturated with the intoxicating scent of 1,000 blossoms. The inside of the dome is a paradise of impossible beauty. It is a botanical museum, a living library of the rare and the exotic. Perfect, geometric beds are filled with flowers from every continent. There are orchids of unearthly shape and color, passion flowers with intricate, alien-like structures, and birds of paradise that look like origami sculptures. Everything is pristine, flawless. There is not a single brown leaf, not a single wilted petal. The air is filled with the gentle hiss of automated nisters and the hum of climate control systems. It is a world of absolute, obsessive order. And in the center of the dome, standing before a raised bed of the most stunning, deep red camellias Finch has ever seen, is a man. He is tall and slender, dressed in a simple, clean work shirt and trousers. He has dark, neatly combed hair and a handsome, intelligent face. He is carefully tending to one of the camellia bush with a small pair of silver shears. He does not seem surprised by their arrival. He doesn't even turn around at first. "Alistair Finch," he says, his voice calm and melodic, without a trace of fear. "I wondered when you would arrive. I do admire your methodical nature, so much more dignified than the brutes they usually send." He turns slowly, a faint, placid smile on his face. He places the shears down on a workbench. His eyes are the most intense Finch has ever encountered, dark, focused, and utterly devoid of any discernible emotion. They are the eyes of a scientist. Observing a specimen, "Julian Croft," Finch says, his voice steady, his weapon still aimed at the man's center mass. "You're under arrest for the murder of Elara Vance." Julian inclines his head slightly, as if accepting a compliment. "Arrest is such a crude term," he says, his voice a soft baritone that seems to be absorbed by the thick floral air. "It implies a crime. What I did was not a crime. It was a curation, an act of preservation." He gestures around the dome. "Do you see? All this beauty. It's so fragile. In the outside world, it is subject to disease, to weather, to the clumsiness of time. It withers, it fades, it dies. But in here, I can control the environment. I can create perfection, and I can preserve it." He takes a step toward them, and Gunderson tenses, but Finch holds up a hand. Julian stops. "Elara was the same," he continues, his gaze distant, as if watching a memory. "She was the most perfect thing I had ever found. Her passion, her sadness, her art. It was a unique and beautiful bloom. But she wanted to be in the world. She didn't understand that the world would destroy her. It would have made her common. She would have aged. Her art would have faltered. She would have faded." He looks directly at Finch, his eyes holding a chilling sort of sincerity. "I couldn't allow that. I had to pick her at the moment of her most perfect bloom, to preserve her just like my flowers, to make her eternal." "So you hunted her for 7 years," Finch says, his voice low and cold. "I tended to her," Julian corrects him gently. "From a distance, I gave her space to settle, to put down roots, to create her final great body of work, the art born of her fear of me. It was her masterpiece. And when it was complete, it was time. The final brushstroke. The camellia," Finch says. A genuine radiant smile spreads across Julian's face. "Ah, you appreciate that. Camellia japonica, the crimson kiss. A hybrid I developed myself. The culmination of 7 years of work. It requires a precise balance of light, humidity, and nutrients to achieve that specific shade of red and to bloom so perfectly out of season. It was her flower. It was made for her, a symbol of a love so perfect it must be sealed in death." He says it all with no remorse, no guilt. He speaks with the detached passion of an artist explaining his masterpiece. In his mind, he is not a monster. He is a savior, a curator of beauty. This is the violent truth, laid bare in a hothouse of terrifying perfection. "On the table behind me," Julian says, gesturing with his chin, "you will find her journals from San Francisco. And mine. I've been documenting my work for years. You'll also find the weapon, A custom-made steel spike, thin as a camellia stem. I designed it to be as quick and painless as possible. An act of mercy, you see. It's all there. My entire collection is now complete. My work is finished. He holds out his hands, wrists together, in a gesture of serene surrender. He has been waiting for this. The capture, the trial, the documentation of his life's work. It is all part of the final exhibition. He is the artist, and now he is. Ready to attend his own opening. The arrest is quiet. Julian Croft offers no resistance as Sheriff Gunderson cuffs him. He walks out of his glass Eden and into the cold, dark woods without a backward glance. The aftermath is a slow return to the mundane. The trial is a media sensation, but Julian remains silent and placid throughout, a strange, calm eye in the center of a legal and media hurricane. His journals, read in court, horrify and fascinate the world. He is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he is placed in permanent solitary confinement for his own protection. A collector finally collected Dot in Port Blossom. The healing is slow and incomplete. The tourists eventually return, drawn by the same rugged beauty that drew Elara Vance. The town's rhythm finds its way back. But something has changed. More doors are locked at night. The shared illusion of perfect safety is gone, replaced by a harder, more sober reality. The story of the Camellia Killer becomes a local legend, a ghost story told on foggy nights. A dark stain on the town's picturesque beauty. Alistair Finch leaves Port Blossom not long after the trial. His work is done. One evening, months later, he sits in his own home, far from the coast, a fire crackling in his own hearth. He thinks of Elara Vance, a woman who ran to the sea for freedom and found only a more patient cage. He thinks of Julian Croft, a man whose mind was a beautiful, terrifying greenhouse, where love and obsession grew into the same poisonous flower. The world is full of such hidden places, Finch knows, full of dark gardens and silent collectors. Most we never see, but sometimes the door is left open, and a truth, both violent and profound, is brought out into the light. And now our story is over. The fire has burned down to its last glowing embers. The house is still. The peaceful night has held, a safe harbor from the violent truths we have explored. The story is contained, the killer is caught, the questions are answered. There is a sense of order restored. However fragile, Dot, let the quiet of your room be a comfort. Let the weight of your blankets be a shield. The darkness is real, but for tonight, it is only a story. For tonight, you are safe. Close your eyes. The night is for peace. The night is for rest. Sleep now. Sleep.